In this chapter, we will talk about cross-contamination in the field and what actions we can take to protect leafy greens from cross-contamination. First, we need to remember that a contaminant is any biological, chemical, or physical material unintentionally added to food that can make it unsafe or unsuitable for eating. Now let's get started by defining cross-contamination. This is the transfer of contaminants in the form of harmful substance or microbes from something dirty to something clean, in our case, to the leafy greens we work with. The green dots simulate microbes that get transferred from the dirty equipment to the leafy greens. Leafy greens got contaminated by the equipment. This is cross-contamination. This is not the only practice that can mean trouble. There are several practices in the field that could cause cross-contamination of leafy greens. Preventing this from happening is part of our job. One way to prevent leafy greens contamination is to keep your hand harvesting equipment, such as knives and coring rings, clean. And you should always use harvesting tools in proper condition. Chipped knife blades, broken handles, or tape on handles are not allowed in the fields. Bins, tables, baskets, mechanical harvesters, brushes, and buckets must be cleaned and sanitized daily. The container you see here has chlorine or other chemical sanitizing solution at a proper concentration. Your supervisors are in charge of providing these solutions, and they monitor them regularly. When leaving the field for breaks or other purposes, leave your knife in the provided container with sanitizer until you return to work. Sanitize your harvesting knife at the end or the beginning of each day. Every time you return to work from breaks or lunch, when moving from field to field, dropping it accidentally, and any time contamination has occurred. Remember that knives and other picking equipment must stay within your company at all times. This means that they can't be taken home. Let's jump into another important area. Harvesting machines can also be a source of contamination. Any farming equipment that comes into contact with raw manure, untreated compost, waters of unknown quality, animal hazards, or other potential contamination sources must be cleaned and sanitized following your company's procedures. If you spot any of these contamination sources when harvesting, it is your job to notify your supervisor immediately. Sanitation of the harvesting machines must be done away from the product and other equipment. Runoff of water and cleaning products should not reach the growing area. Use only the water source authorized by your supervisor. When you are done cleaning, store the harvesting machines in an area away from potential hazards, including roads, buildings, wells, chemical storage areas, animals, and farm inputs. These practices will help to minimize the risk of cross-contamination. A food contact source is the part of the equipment or a utensil that food normally comes into contact with, or onto which food may drain, drip, or splash. Examples of food contact surfaces are blades and knives, conveyor belts, baskets and bins, cutting boards, etc. Do not walk, step, sit, or lie on food contact surfaces of equipment. Make sure that drip pans are in place. Check and clean them before the equipment enters the field. It is your job to follow your company's proper procedures for cleaning and sanitizing food contact surfaces to minimize cross-contamination. Note that the effectiveness of all cleaning procedures is monitored and evaluated through visual and microbial evaluations. Your supervisors are in charge of documenting all monitoring activities and corrective actions. They also play a key role in preventing cross-contamination. If not properly handled, packaging materials and containers can also be another source of contamination. Harvesting containers must only be used to carry harvested product. No foreign materials, such as tools, soda cans, nails, or clothing, may be placed in or on the containers. Always store containers and packaging materials on pallets or truck trailers, not directly on the ground. Box assembly must be off the ground on pallets, trucks, or trailers. Containers and all packaging materials must be inspected before use. While inspecting them, look for loose pieces, pests and pest droppings, damage, trash, and debris. Only clean and undamaged harvest materials, liners, and containers can be used in the field. If you see any loose pieces, pests, pest droppings, damage, trash, and/or debris in any harvesting container while picking, report it immediately to your supervisor. Lastly, packaging materials or containers should not be stored near water sources, pesticides, chemical mixing or storage areas, or portable toilets. Bad microbes can be in the dirt on the ground and cross-contaminate the harvested leafy greens. If product falls on the ground while you are harvesting, leave it there or discard it properly. Do not stack bins that have soil on them on top of each other if the bottom of one bin has had direct contact with the soil, unless a protective barrier such as a liner or cover is used to separate the containers. Finally, any packaging container that contacts the ground must be sent back for sanitation or be disposed of properly. Let's review an example of a situation that can happen in a ranch. In this take, the employee is putting product that fell on the ground back in a basket. Now we can see that he is putting the product in the truck, even though the product or packaging materials came in contact with the ground. In this final take, he is following the correct procedure. He is discarding the product. Equipment proper maintenance is important too. There should be no loose or damaged parts on harvest machines, tractors or trailers, including nuts and bolts or glass lights. Loose or damaged parts must be replaced or fixed immediately with the proper material. Do not use string, tape, wire, and/or cardboard for temporary repairs. Your job may not be to fix things. However, if you see anything that is not working properly or does not look good, report it immediately to your supervisor. Remember, maintenance employees should also follow good personal hygiene practices at all times. Harvesting equipment must be free of fluid leaks or excess of grease. Any leafy greens that come in contact with dirt, grease, or oil must be removed and disposed properly. You should immediately notify your supervisor if you find hydraulic fluid in a product and/or a hose leaking from the harvesting machine to a conveyor belt. Equipment leaks and spills must be cleaned before continuing harvesting. Portable restroom units must be cleaned and serviced regularly to prevent leaking or spilling. If you spot a leak or a spill in the portable restrooms, report it immediately to your supervisor. The crop or soil can be contaminated with bad microbes by animal hazards. Contamination can happen through physical contact or fecal matter. Animal hazards include, but are not limited to, skin, feathers, fecal matter, or signs of animal presence. Signs of animal presence may be downed fences, animal tracks in the production block, animal feces, urine, or eaten plants in your working area. If you see any animal hazards in an area to be harvested or in your working area, you should report it immediately to your supervisor. What if fecal material is found in the field? If you find evidence of fecal matter, report it immediately to your supervisor. The company's food safety professional should conduct and document a food safety assessment. Harvesting cannot begin again until the area is evaluated by completing the food safety assessment and cleared of contamination. Do not harvest any product within 5 feet of contamination, and always be aware of the flagged areas. These represent buffer zones around any animal activity and will help to adequately control or minimize the risk of contamination. If you have a cut or an open sore or wound, you should report it to your supervisor before you start working. If you cut your hand or finger while harvesting leafy greens, tell your supervisor about the incident so he can provide you with further instructions on what to do. Use only bandages provided by your supervisor. These are metal detectable. You and your supervisor must make sure that blood and/or body fluids do not get on any harvested or unharvested product, knives, or containers, such as boxes or baskets. If blood, pus, or any other body fluid got on any leafy greens or packing containers, These leafy greens should be thrown away immediately or equipment cleaned and sanitized following the company's blood cleaning policy. No unprotected glass is permitted in production areas. Glass or glass containers are not allowed in or on the field borders. If broken glass is found in a leafy green container, you must throw this product away and report it immediately to your supervisor. Chemical contamination occurs when food products come in contact with harmful chemical compounds during the growing, harvesting, and packaging of leafy greens. Chemical contaminants in the field include pesticides, chemical cleaning products, sanitizers, and oil for machinery. If you see any chemicals that are used incorrectly or not stored properly, report this immediately to your supervisor. When working with chemicals, remember to always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Use proper handling procedures and never use non-appropriate containers for storing or applying chemicals. Waste and trash are sources of contamination and should be placed in designated containers. These containers should be emptied daily and more often if necessary. Eat at designated areas only and do not leave trash behind. It may end up in the field, which could increase the risk of contamination. Cleaning waste containers or taking out trash might not be your responsibility, but if you see that receptacles are full, you should tell your supervisor immediately. The ranch you work at has a system for checking visitors in and out. All visitors must check in with the supervisor and adhere to the company food safety policies and procedures at all times. Do not hesitate to report to your supervisor any inappropriate behavior or any practice that might put the leafy greens at risk of contamination. This is the end of our discussion about cross-contamination. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask your supervisor or your company's food safety professional. Keep in mind that working with food carries a great responsibility. Make sure you follow your company's food safety policies and procedures at all times. This will help to minimize the risk of leafy greens contamination. Remember that we all have the same goal: to assure that every consumer gets safe leafy greens.